Okay, thank you for joining us for this edition of MIT Mondays. I'm Denzil Streete, Senior Associate Dean and Director of Graduate Education here at MIT. And we're joined by Jadal Williams, who is a MechE student here at MIT, and you'll hear from Jadal in a few seconds. Um, so MIT Mondays is our attempt at demystifying the pathway to the PhD. And our hope is from these conversations with current students at MIT, you're able to get a true sense of what it's like to prepare applying to a competitive PhD program and how do you succeed in such a program. So thank you for joining us. So Jadal, thank you for agreeing to be a part of this series. And maybe let's start off a bit with you introducing yourself. Tell us a bit about your background, where you're from, what did you study as an undergraduate, what was your undergraduate institution?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. I'm Jadal Williams. I'm a PhD candidate in robotics and computer vision through mechanical engineering at MIT, originally from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I've kind of lived all over. Grew up in Michigan, went to undergrad, studied mechanical engineering at Stanford, so in California, and now I'm here on the East Coast at MIT. So lived both sides of the coast and excited to be here.
Perfect. So, Jadal, you went to a pretty competitive undergraduate institution, but even so, like what inspired you to even consider a PhD? Like, what was your probably career intentions? Like, how did a PhD come on your radar?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, I studied mechanical engineering and I knew that I liked robotics. And I kept hearing about this whole concept of robotics and robots and technologies getting better and better. And it's very hard to teach yourself how to build and interact with robots. I mean, one, they're very expensive, right? And two, it's just all the integrations and hardware and those pieces are harder than, let's say, pure software, which is a little bit easier to read a few books online or follow tutorials and teach yourself. And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue a higher degree so that I could enhance my skill set in this domain and then apply those skills for the future.
And so talk to me a bit about your undergraduate experience. Like, what were the things you did that made you feel like you were well prepared for a PhD program?
I dabbled between a few majors in undergrad. So I ended up with mechanical engineering, but it was also looking at computer science and electrical engineering. So would take classes in kind of all three of those for almost the first 2 years, and then finally settled in on mechanical engineering because of actually taking the introduction to robotics class and just seeing that interest in doing hand-on design. And I think just taking a lot of these classes and being involved in kind of communities such as NESB and groups like that really helped me see I'd like to pursue this further. And that's what brought me here to MIT.
Perfect. So we'll come back to talk specifically about applying to the PhD program, but I think you've led us right up to telling us the research that you do here at MIT. So I'll allow you to just talk to us about what is your research project and how did you come across that as a potential project? I don't know if your program, some programs have rotations, like how did you end up in your lab? So talk to us a bit about that, and then we'll come back to applying to the PhD.
Yeah, I think for me it's interesting because I switched labs. So I started off doing my master's in computer vision for construction automation. So I was building robots to help automate building excavators and tractors and in construction facilities. And then actually switched for the PhD. So now I do computer vision for basketball automation. So we use AI to bring automated officiating in the NBA. So imagine different sensors around basketball courts that could help assist and make better refereeing.
Oh, wow. So I'll have a lot of questions about that when we come back to your PhD, only because I spent all day yesterday watching NBA basketball. So as you're thinking about applying to PhD programs, did you have a system that you felt worked for you, that you sort of essentially hacked the application process? Talk to us a bit about how you determine the schools that you applied to and your whole process of applying.
I think for me, I knew I wanted to study robotics. And so then it was, what are the best schools in robotics? Okay, I could stay on the West Coast, or I could come over here to the East, and looked at 4 or 5 different schools that I was interested in. And then I searched online for different research labs and learned about some of the research there, and then tried to go to their visit days and reach out to different professors and students in the lab. I think one of the big distinctions between grad school and undergrad is that the majority of your time is spent in your lab. And so it's not necessarily the university, but it's actually the professor, research group, and funding is bigger criteria than I'd say the school name per se.
And so talk to us a bit about how many schools were on that list, and then ultimately, how did you decide upon MIT?
Yeah, for me, for grad school, I only applied to 5 different schools, so fairly small. I would say more tailored approach. And I knew MIT, famous for robotics. I mean, you have the robot cheetah that happened a few years ago that was on CNN and everything there, and then you have Boston Dynamics and all the history with that, and just seeing so much innovation being done here in Boston. And so that's what really drew me here. And I looked at about 3 to 4 different labs that I might be interested in, and started reaching out to um, different professors and whatnot after the application process.
Perfect. Think back to those days of applying to graduate school. Was there anything that was particularly stressful or challenging in the process? And if you could think of something, how did you overcome that challenge?
I think sometimes it's hard to understand what exactly is going on in the labs, and you might search if you don't know anybody at the university, then you might do a generic search. Okay, I want to study mechanical engineering. So you search, MIT mechanical engineering, and there might be a website. But then how do you know which lab is doing what, and what are their recent projects versus what they did 10 or 20 years ago, right? And so I think that was a hard challenge for any university, just really understanding what is the current research being done in those facilities. And I think one thing that I used that helped me is you can find the names of the faculty, and then you can search them on Google Scholar, for example. And Google Scholar will list all their publications, and you can filter in order. So now you can see what was the publications from 2025, 2024, 2023, et cetera, versus looking at research from, the late 90s or early 2000s, which may not be the primary focus of the lab anymore.
Perfect. So I think that's a really good tip for our attendees, like leveraging Google Scholar, right, to sort of understanding how, what the lab is doing currently, or at least most recently, and sort of pitching yourself into relationship with that type of research. And I'll say another one that Jadal did mention that I always have on top of my list is almost most, I would say most lab groups would have a website, and you would know who the current students are on that website. You're very more likely to get a response from a student like Jadal in the lab than you are from the PI, right? So look up those graduate students in the lab or postdocs, and request a meeting, right? A Zoom meeting, or exchange emails as to what is the current research. Maybe make it personal. What is the research that student is working on, as a way of sort of closing that gap from what is sort of the public-facing website information and what may actually be happening day to day in the lab. Which allows me, Jadal, so you talked to us a bit about your doctoral project, right?
Mhm.
Which is looking at utilizing AI, I think you said, and
Yes.
NBA officiating. So before we talk a little bit about a day in the life of a doctoral student, how did you, as an undergraduate, start off thinking, hey, I'm in love with robotics. I'm choosing the 5 best robotics programs in the country to apply to. And now you've transitioned away from that, or at least I'm thinking you transitioned away from that into the use of AI and sort of, I guess, tracking movement and stuff like that. Like, what is the overlap between the original intentions and what you're doing now? Maybe how did you leverage robotics to the field that you're in now? Like, talk to us about that transition, because most students think hey, I'm an undergraduate interested in robotics. I'm going to have to do robotics until I die, right? So
Mhm.
how did you make that transition from what was your intentions at applying? You admitted to come and do robotics, but now you're doing something totally different. Talk to us a bit about that.
I think one of the purposes of a PhD is teaching you how to learn. And I'm still working in the robotic sphere. My specialty is in computer vision, which is the cameras of the robots. So even when I was doing the kind of construction robotics work, it was, yes, I built the robot, but then I also would install a camera and then we're doing visual inspection of different parts and items that come through. And now I'm doing computer vision, cameras, other sensors throughout basketball courts and performing analysis there. So it's still a form of robotics. It's not a physical robot that's walking and moving around, but it's the sensors and all the hardware and components that are inside of all these robots as well. So I think I'm still following that same domain, but I've learned how to leverage those skills to apply them to very interesting applications.
Perfect. And so talk to me with a project like that. Talk to us a bit about what does the day in the life of Jadal Williams look like? Like to walk us through a pretty typical day or weekday or a day when you're on campus doing work and all of the other things that go around that.
I think the MIT Sports Lab is very unique. We meet with our sponsors regularly. So in our lab, we meet with our sponsors once a week. So I meet with the MBA and we discuss different ideas and research criteria. I'll spend some time reading papers, trying to understand what are the latest novelties and technologies being introduced. And then we get to the fun part of actually doing some experiments. So I'll go out to the basketball court and maybe test out a sensor, collect some data, um, collaborate with others, and then start brainstorming what's new, what's novel, and what can we add here, and then start trying to train different machine learning models.
And are you doing this as part of a team of students? Like, talk to us about the composition of the lab working on this project.
Yes. So for this project, I'm the only PhD student working on it. However, I have a few undergrads and master students that help me as well. And so there's a plethora of people I can brainstorm ideas with, help allocate tasks and make sure that everything gets done. And then luckily we have other PhD students working with FIFA, for example. And so they're also working on similar areas and we can collaborate there.
Perfect. So here we see, you would think, oh, I'm coming to MIT to do research and it's going to be in a stuffy lab. Folks would never see the impacts of my work. But, you talked about two projects in the lab, right? Both NBA and FIFA.
Mhm.
And you trying to figure out the future of, I would guess, a lot of human movement, right? Soccer players and basketball players and trying to teach AI how to make certain calls, I would assume, right?
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. So talk to us. So we now understand your research. We heard how a typical day, what a typical day looks like. Um, Generally, what has the experience been as a graduate student at MIT? Like, how do you navigate beyond the classes? What are some of the things you may even though you may have come from a well-resourced and sort of competitive undergraduate program, what are some things you didn't think of that you'd need help with as a graduate student? And how are you managing those challenges that are sort of non-academic?
In graduate school, you spend a lot of your time doing research, but then you also have classes to take. And you're taking way less classes in graduate school than in undergrad. Typically, I took 1 to 2 classes per semester here at MIT, whereas in undergrad, I was taking 4 or 5. And so my immediate thought was, oh, I have way less classes, so I can have plenty of time to do research. But that's not necessarily true. These classes still have a lot of rigor towards them. And so it was really just finding that balance of going to office hours, asking for help, and finding teams to collaborate with. A lot of the classes I took were group projects, so coordinating outside of class time when to meet with a group and divvy up work and get things done. And so finding that balance there, but then also finding an outlet to take time outside of doing work to hang out with friends, travel, explore, and really reset the mind so that you're able to do some good and solid research.
And what are some of the things you think have been beneficial that are sort of non-research or academic based that have really made a difference with your success as a graduate student?
I think one thing is community. I've been a instructor for MSRP, which is a summer program here at MIT, teaching underrepresented students who are interested in going to grad school to do research on campus for the summer. And I've bonded a lot with the other teachers. And so the other graduate students we all have similar backgrounds and similar goals and want to help people. And now I found a new community within teaching the students, but then also amongst ourselves. And that's been great. I've taken classes with plenty of them. We've hung out, and it's really found like a sense of community and bonding throughout graduate school.
Perfect. So Jadal just mentioned our MIT summer research program, and we've put the link in the chat if you're a student based in the USA who will not be graduating, you could apply to the summer research program, and you're brought here to campus for 9 weeks to be paired in an MIT lab with an MIT faculty member to get some summer research done. So the link is in the chat if you're interested in our summer research program. So Jadal, talk to me a bit about what you've learned about yourself while being in graduate school.
One thing I've learned is that their opportunities are limitless and that every opportunity is an opportunity to an opportunity. And I've really made sure to use my time wisely here. I've tried to participate in a variety of different programs. I actually most recently just got back from Rwanda. I spent the whole month of January in Kigali, Rwanda through MISTI, which is a MIT study abroad program, and teaching math and AI at a high school there. And just that was an amazing opportunity. I learned so much from it. And I've done many other similar programs throughout my years here. So just being able to see that I'm not siloed to, oh, I can only do robotics or I'm only doing computer vision. I just taught math at a high school. And so similar areas where I can apply and give back to others has been super useful.
Perfect. So many of our attendees today, they're trying to figure out for themselves, like, how do I get into, an institution like MIT to pursue a PhD? So knowing what you know now, like, what is one piece of advice you'd give to an undergraduate, right? Who is like yourself, who's seeking to, apply to PhD programs like places like MIT? Like, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone?
I'd say it's all about telling a story. How can you craft your brand and who you are and why you want to get a PhD and what do you plan to do by attending graduate school? I think that's what really stands out at the end of the day. It's your personal essay and your story, and it's saying, hey, this is my background, this is what I've done, and this is where I'm headed, and this is how MIT can help me reach that goal. And so that's the biggest piece of advice is really trying to think, what is your story? How can you craft it? And what do you plan to do afterwards with this new knowledge and information?
Perfect. And so you move from applicant thinking, oh, I'll just put my hat in the ring, apply to schools like MIT, and now you're a student. What do you think is the biggest misconception folks have about a place like MIT? Like, folks on the outside looking in, and now you yourself have been here as a student. Like, what's one big misconception you think someone would have?
I think one misconception is that, oh, everybody just works in tech and they don't do anything outside of work and everybody just works all day till 5 a.m. and it's just work, work, work. And there are aspects, at any school, there are days where, yes, you're in the lab till late, but there's also that balance. And I do think that works well here in Boston, where there's what I want to say 70 colleges within a 20-mile radius or something like that. There's a lot of universities all here, and they do collaborate and interact with each other. And it's a great walkable city to meet and interact with people. And so there are plenty of things to do in the city, and collaborate with others outside of just work.
Perfect. And let me use this opportunity to tell our attendees we'll take questions from the audience. So if you have a question for Jadal, feel free to use the Q&A function on your Zoom dashboard. And if you were to put in a question, we'll ask that question shortly. I think I have like two more questions and then we'll jump to audience questions. So put those questions in the Q&A function and we'll get to them in a second. One other question for you. What is one thing you wish you knew when you were applying to PhD programs that you eventually found out, but you wish somebody had told you?
Hmm. I think understanding how long people will be in the labs. So when I was coming into my first lab coming out of undergrad, starting here at MIT on my master's, I bonded with one of the previous graduate students, and I didn't realize he was graduating. And so when I showed up here on campus, his defense was 1 month after I had joined, and then he was gone. And I was like, oh wow, well, was not expecting that at all. And so just really, as I mentioned, you spend the majority of your time in your lab. So it's very important to get to know the members of the lab and everybody there, but then also understanding their timelines and goals as well. And oh, are you defending anytime soon and things like that are just very important things to consider when you're joining a new facility.
Perfect. So I could imagine for an individual like you, like the things you're working on haven't yet been developed or implemented, right? Because we don't see AI being used in refereeing of NBA games. So what inspires you to keep going and to, stick with research where I'm sure you don't yet know what the outcome is going to be?
I think I'm a very applied person, and this is a very practical application. And that's why I really like the sports lab is we're doing applied research that is in constant communication with the sponsor. So we're not working in a black box and then, 5 months or a year later we check in with them. It's a weekly cadence, almost like a job per se, if you were working at a company. And that's very unique and it allows you to get that constant feedback and reassurance of the broader objective and where we're heading. And that's what motivates me is I know the end goal of this work and how impactful it can be and how it could change and make things for the better.
And in that same vein, as you think about a future career, like when do you plan to graduate, by the way?
Hopefully the end of this year. So
Oh,
aiming for
wow.
December. So,
At the end of this year. So what are you thinking career-wise? Like, what are some, because of course the NBA may be an option, but like career-wise, what are you thinking you'll go to next?
I see myself as a technologist. How can I apply AI and robotics to different domains? I mentioned doing it in construction. Now we're looking at it in sports applications. And so, maybe I'll be working in this space. Maybe it's working on something of my own. I'm keeping my options flexible, but I do think that there's a world where I can apply this unique skill of applying AI and computer vision to particular domains that I'm interested in and want to work on every day.
Perfect. And so now we have some questions from the audience, and I'll take the first one. What type of research experience makes someone a competitive applicant?
It's a good question. I did not have much research experience before graduate school. I joined a lab briefly during one semester in undergrad, and then COVID happened, and so then that kind of ended. So I would say that it's not, you don't necessarily need to have a bunch of research and papers and things in undergrad. It's really about your story, your criteria, what you've worked on, and where you're headed. And so that's, I'd say, the major focus. Yes, if you have the opportunity to do research, it would definitely help, but you do not have to do research every semester, every summer. I worked a few internships and really got to feel out what am I interested in and what do I want to do.
Perfect. The next question is, How did you develop good relationships with PIs and other people in the lab?
To establish a good relationship, it's all about transparency and communication and finding something to kind of bond over. So I always try to get to know everybody in my lab. I always say, hey, what do you like to do for fun? I'm currently in the sports lab, so I said, hey, I want to go to a sports game. There's a basketball game going on, or let's go. We've gone to Fenway a few times to see some of the Red Sox play and baseball and things like that. So I think finding something to bond over and then collecting over that, or other times it's just like, hey, let's grab lunch and just collaborate with your peers. On the kind of PI level, it's similar, but I would say it's just going to their office hours and just sitting down. And sometimes I don't have a question about my research. I just want to ask, hey, what drew you to become a professor, and what are you thinking about all the time, and what are you looking at into outside of kind of your general research sphere? So just trying to connect on a personal level has really helped me build these connections and establish relationships for the long term.
Perfect. And maybe I'll ask you that question. How do you find joy?
Giving back and helping others. I think that's what it is at the end of the day is how can I learn these skills and leverage them to design devices to make a difference in society. And it's been a lot of fun building these tools and experimenting and conducting research and then having the time to mentor undergraduate students, to teach at different places. Like I said, I was just across the world in a different continent, and then I've done different study abroads in Denmark as well throughout my time here at MIT, and just being able to go to different places, see a different environment, and then learn how my skills and knowledge can help make a difference for others.
Perfect. Um, we still have quite some time, so I'll invite our audience to ask some more questions. Um, in the meantime, let me see if I have a question I can ask you. Um, So I know some of our attendees may be pursuing summer research programs, and you've had some experience being a sort of a graduate student leader for summer students here at MIT. Like, what are some tips you have for students embarking in summer research that you think you want to share with our attendees? Like, how would you suggest they best make use of programs like that?
I think if you have the opportunity to go to another university to do research, one, you want to do great at your job, obviously. So making sure you understand the criteria and have clear communication with your PI. What is expected to be done this summer? Is the goal to get a paper out, or is the goal to just learn and advance your own skill sets, right? Because I think those are two completely different conversations. And then do you plan on working on this afterwards? I think that's a conversation maybe halfway through or a little bit further through the internship, but just having those thought processes in mind are super useful. And then seeing what connections you can leverage from being in a new environment. So if there's maybe not the lab that you're in, but maybe there's another professor or there's another event that's going on at this university, it, go to those, hang out, start talking to people and start building relationships there, connect with people on LinkedIn, ask for emails, and just be able to stay in communication as your journey and as your career progresses.
Perfect. And meantime, we got another question from one of our attendees. What techniques do you employ to understand new course material and study effectively?
The number one tool is office hours. So the professors and the TAs are there to help. And so I think that's the best resource. Outside of that, searching things up on online, there might be other courses at different universities that may be similar and maybe they teach it in a slightly different manner. So sometimes they have videos on YouTube of different lectures, and you can watch those from courses here at MIT or for other universities and see and learn the same material from a different perspective. And maybe that helps you understand it better. So I'd say those were my two recommendations.
Perfect. Attendees, we have some time for a few more questions if you have a question. I think, including about his research, right? I just asked the questions that came to my mind. But if you have questions about his research, I think that's also fair game. We have a few minutes. We could take like three more questions. Let me give folks some time. Is there something, Jadal, that you thought I would ask, but I didn't ask that you want to share now?
Um, I thought you would have asked, what do you recommend, one thing that everybody does while in grad school or something of that nature.
Right.
And I think the answer to that, I was going to say study abroad and get an opportunity to step outside of your comfort zone and don't necessarily feel like you have to know everybody on the trip that you're going to. So I studied abroad in Odense, Denmark by myself. I didn't know anybody else that was going. And there was 50 grad students from across the world when we met there for like a 1 month robotics entrepreneurship program. And then even similarly with Rwanda, sometimes I asked around different friends, hey, is anybody interested? And sometimes schedules don't align, but don't be afraid to do something by yourself. And you never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to connect with, and grow from there. And you'd be surprised how much you know. And once you step in a different environment, you might realize that more. And that's what I've learned from my travels.
Perfect. What was your biggest impression about Rwanda?
The innovation is amazing. They built their NBA stadium in 6 months.
Oh,
In the
wow.
United States, that would take at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 years to build a full professional stadium, 10,000 seats, etc. Is and that just shows you the level of innovation and willingness to build new technology throughout the country. And the other thing is the city is Kigali, especially, is extremely clean. There's no trash anywhere. They banned plastic in 2008, I believe. So you just see such a major capital city, which is extremely clean, which you do not see in a lot of places across the world.
Yeah, I thought that that would have been number one. So I was in Rwanda maybe 4 years, 5 years ago, and I'm still like tormented. Like, why can't the rest of the world be as
Right,
clean
exactly. Yeah.
as Kigali, right? I was like, I spent the 2 weeks I was there looking for trash,
Yeah.
like to point out that there, you see, they missed something, but I couldn't find any trash in 2 weeks, and yeah, that was really amazing. Did you get to see the gorillas in Rwanda?
I didn't see the gorillas, but I went to Akagera and saw some lions, elephants, and things like that. So I did a mini safari, which I'd never done before as
Oh,
well. So that
nice.
was super cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I saw the gorillas and it was definitely a top three life moment for me. We have another question. So I think I'll just end that segment by saying travel. It's a
Yes.
whole big world out there. You should be exposed as much as possible, and it can be definitely life-changing. So the question from one of our attendees is, throughout your undergraduate and graduate career, would you have done anything differently, or are there any mistakes you would like to share? That's a great question.
Great question. I think the number one thing I would have changed my major. So I majored in mechanical engineering. I actually would have switched to computer science. The reason for that is because of course restrictions. Mechanical engineering has way more requirements, which means there's less flexibility to take other classes. So I mentioned I had this varied interest in kind of mechanical engineering, computer science, and electrical engineering, which is what drew me to robotics. But I could still do the exact same work and change my major and then have more flexibility to take other classes of interest on the side. So I think that is something to take into consideration as well. What are the course and graduation requirements that you need, and what major will help you satisfy those and still allow you to have flexibility to study abroad, for example, or maybe you want to take a music and art class and maybe it's harder to fit with a different major, and then you can always take the class of interest in the other majors. So those are some things to consider.
And does anything fall in the bucket of mistakes? Is there anything you did that you would like a do-over on?
I think taking the effort I've changed a lot in grad school from undergrad, but trying to meet as many people as possible. I think especially your first 2 to 3 years in undergrad is a great opportunity to just meet as many people as possible. You never know who you're going to meet, where they're from, what are they working on, and if you ever wanted to build a company with somebody in the future, just establishing all those connections now is super important. And then learning how to reach out and follow up with people. Obviously people have different lives, everybody's busy, but there's ways to stay in contact where it doesn't feel super burdensome and that you're annoying the other person for checking in. And I think learning those skills has been revolutionary for me in establishing a strong network.
Perfect. Last call for questions from our attendees. If not, I think Jadal, I think you may be one of the, no, one that we spoke to last week was also almost at the end of their career. So you've gone the full span of graduate school. And so congratulations on being
Thank you.
almost at the finish line. And then we get one last question. Is it important to be in a top university in undergrad to make it a top-notch school for PhD? Maybe one way you could also answer this question is talk about some of the people you've met at MIT and where they came from to give a sense of who actually comprises the graduate students in top programs like MIT.
Graduate students come from everywhere. I have friends from HBCUs, I have friends from state schools. Some went to top universities, others did not. So I do not think it matters strictly what university you go to. I do think it's about your story and your perspective and what you bring to the table. So I would not be concerned solely based on the university that you attend.
Perfect. And I'll just add one thing, and it also matters the research fit, right? You should less be driven on this PhD sort of journey by the name of the institution. You should be driven by who's doing the type of research that you see yourself being attracted to and go where those people are, right? In most cases, graduate admissions is driven by faculty compatibility, right? So to the extent that you can find institutions at which your research background and the research you wish to pursue as part of a sort of career doctoral education, that's the programs that are more likely to admit you. And as you would have seen from Jadal's experience, you may think you're going to do this one thing, right? And you come to a place like MIT and a range of opportunities open themselves, right? So you should also be prepared to take advantage of whatever is placed in front of you because you may come thinking, I want to do this one thing, and you have other opportunities, and you should be just as flexible to make yourself take advantage of those opportunities. So with that, Jadal, I'll ask you for any final words you have for our audience.
I think that right now is a great time to learn. There's so many resources, especially around AI, and I encourage everybody to learn how to use these tools effectively as they're really changing industries in the game in the future. And yeah, learn as much as you can and try to craft your story and how you can use that to succeed in graduate school and beyond.
Perfect. So thank you all for joining us today. I think we have one more episode of MIT Mondays coming up. Give us a few days, and Jadal's interview would be up if you sat through today's event and thought of, hey, my friend John or Jane needed to hear this. Feel free to recommend them to come to our website, and you'll get access to Jadal's story, but also all of the other graduate students we would have interviewed at MIT Mondays. And with that, we'll sign off. And thank you so much, Jadal, and thank you to our attendees for joining us today.
Thank you.
Take
This is
care.
great.